Oh. Oh. Hello and welcome to the webinar about summer data. My name is Tracy Mao and I work on child nutrition programs at USDA. Thank you all for joining. Just for everyone's knowledge, there's a chat box, and so in that box you can type any questions or feedback that you have as we go on, and I'll try to keep an eye on that as I present. So we're here to talk about Summer Food Service Program and how we get our data from summer sites to the various mapping applications that we have. So for the next, if you have any issues, again, just please type it in the chat and also any questions and anything for feedback. Okay. So the goals for today is to think about things geographically. We do a lot of things geographically already, so it's a pretty small leap. Thinking about how the sponsor applications with all the summer sites go into the Summer Site Finder, thinking about why this matters. And I have an example based out of Mountain Gap. And then how to fix common issues that are common to the data that we've seen over the past couple of years as we've worked with you all to get your summer sites onto the Summer Site Finder. Some next steps, and there'll be a demonstration, and then there's plenty of time for questions. We have the webinar reserved until 4:30. So if you have any questions as we go on, we will be able to answer them. We should have plenty of time. So first, let's discuss thinking about things geographically. Right now, I'm sure you've used Google Maps to get your directions. You know, you've thought about various addresses, how to get from your house to your work, for example. There's also things that are not points, that are more area-based. So counties, the state that you live in, the country that you live in. And then one that we use a lot in our programs is census block groups, and that is, you can see here, which you've probably seen before on our area eligibility mapper. And this is a picture of that. And then what we're going to be talking about mostly today is points, so the actual dots on the map. So that would be like your house or like your work, or in this case, what we're going to be talking about is summer sites. So I'm actually going to switch over to our to my desktop because the animations aren't working on this one. So if you can just be patient with me. And now I won't be able to see the chat box in the immediate future, but I will, or while I'm going through this. So while I will try to go back as frequently as possible to see if there's any chat. Let me see if I can, oh, I actually can see the chat window, so that will work out. I figured that out. Okay, so so at FNS we use a lot of geographic tools. You probably are all familiar with the Summer Site Finder. That's there for children and families to find summer sites during the summer. It's also used a lot by the folks in, you know, police officers, the fire folks, anyone that sees kind of children out in the community that might be in need of a summer meal. And also some of our partners, Share Strength and FRAC and a lot of other folks also use the data behind the Summer Site Finder. And I'm going to show you how they get that data in case you ever want to use those data yourself. So a lot of people are using the data, both using the Summer Site Finder tool that we've built and then also using the data that are behind it, and we couldn't get those data without everyone in those state agencies, so thank you. We also have the Capacity Builder, and the Capacity Builder was built for communities to use to see where there's gaps in service, so seeing where there were summer sites last year, seeing where sites could be eligible this year, and it's great for folks to use at any time throughout the year. It's more complex. If you haven't used it, it's more complex than the Summer Site Finder. It has the summer sites for this year plus all the previous years. So if there's a gap, for example, you could go in and see, okay, this was a summer site 2 years ago. Maybe they would be a summer site again. So that's why we have that continuous data on the Capacity Builder. It also has potential partners. So if you see gaps in service, you can look at libraries and look at congregations and look at various schools in your community. And so folks in the community can use it as well as states. It has a lot more data than the Summer Site Finder. So we try to, families and kids are just looking for a site. We try to get them to the Summer Site Finder. But for people, for planning purposes, we ask them to go to the Capacity Builder where there's a lot more information that they can use to inform where they might want to put summer sites. And we also use the data in the mobile route maker, which is another tool that allows folks, it's a capacity builder with a mobile routing function on top of it. And it has the same data that are in the capacity builder, and it can be used for the sites and sponsors to, let's say if they had a mobile site, or if they had food delivery from a management company, or if you guys in the state agencies are going out and doing your reviews, you can also use this tool. It has driving time as well as walking time, if that's interest for the community for kids trying to get to a site. It can make the most efficient route, so it can you can put in all of your addresses, and it would actually make it more efficient for you. So these are kind of some of the tools that we have built already for using these geographic tools, but the basis for all of this is the summer site data that you all give us every summer to find those summer sites. So besides just the location when you send in your summer sites, we also have a bunch of other information that you may be familiar with. So for example, site name, we have site status, the address, and the city, the state, the site phone, and we're going to go through a little bit more of the template later on in the presentation. So just to go over the process about how the data moves from essentially your sponsor applications to the Summer Site Finder and some of the issues regarding that. First is the data collection and transforming. So you're collecting the data from the sponsor applications, and that can be kind of a fluid process. Somebody might open a site halfway through the summer realizing that they might need a site there. Maybe they'll extend their hours. Maybe they'll move from one sponsor to another. You are much more familiar with this, and this is where it's more of a black box for us because that's more on the data that is hosted on the state agency's computers that we don't see all of that. We see it when it comes into us. So one of the other concerns that I'm going to talk about a little bit is if the exports from your system, so maybe your system doesn't use Excel, and when I've gone out to various state agencies, they don't always use Excel. So how do you get your data into Excel in a way that makes sense? The second step is data cleaning, and so this is what's happening when you send your data into the Summer Site Finder. And so the data cleaning part includes a visual review and follow-up if necessary, layout and formatting, so looking at to see are all the columns there, are all the formatting there, is all the formatting there, is everything in text, and we're going to talk more about that, just about the various formatting that should be happening when it's pulled into our system. And also data quality, so making sure, for example, all the dates are within 2017. So we don't need summer sites that were open in 2015 because that doesn't help kids find the sites now. And so after that process happens, we send those data, so it's essentially gone from your computers to the summer tech support, and then now we send it to the contractor who does the mapping. So they take all of those data and they put it in the map. And some of the issues that can happen there is the address can't be found. There's zip code issues. Sometimes, especially in more rural communities, it might not have an address. The summer site might be an intersection between two cities and, two streets. And so what's the best way to deal with that? And then what's the feedback loop? And that's one thing that we're working on a bit more this year. And before I go on next, I see a question. So is the FNS 543A data acceptable? We have built a report from our vendor. That's perfect, and that's exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to talk about the 543A in a little bit. We have the template ready to go. We're going to mail out the template for this year as well as the instructions for this year after this. So, but thank you for your question and keep them coming in. So on the ground, why does this location matter? And that's because we want children and families to find the sites. We don't want them to walk around, especially because summer is hot. When we were working on our expansion project, I worked in Las Vegas and Nevada, and shout out to anyone who's from there. So thinking about the kids walking the heat of the day for lunch, which is a common meal type, and if they try to walk to a location that's not there, that can be really brutal, especially if they don't have, they didn't bring all water and things like that. So making sure that the right location is there is absolutely essential. And one of the other things that we've seen, it's not super frequent, but we've seen it before, is that at P.O. boxes. And so summer sites can't be at a P.O. box. You can't feed kids in a congregate setting out of a P.O. box. So that's one thing that cannot be, it can't be mapped, and it shouldn't be a site address. And the picture below is just to give you an idea of when we geocode, and I'm going to give you, geocoding just means taking an address and putting the dot on the map. Every time you type an address into Google Maps, for example, that's exactly what it is. It's geocoding that address to the dot on the map. So if you type in your address at home and it zooms into your house, that's geocoding. And when it does that, it's finding the point level geocoding. It's finding the house, finding the spot on the ground, and that's what we're looking for in these data. But if you don't have that, then the system starts to look for, well, if I can't map to an address, what else can I map to? And so it might map to street level. And so that means, okay, it's not at the house, but it's pretty close. We know it's along the street somewhere. And then at the the back end is zip code. And so it could put it in the zip code. And you can see from this example, the zip code is, it seems in this example that it's quite close to the house, but a lot of times zip codes are enormous. And so what it's going to do is put the point in the middle of the zip code. And I have an example of that so you can just see how drastic of a change that makes the system. So the correct location is also needed not just for families and children, but also for monitoring, and the monitoring that you go out, if you're for us or for auditors or for any of the state agencies, to make sure you know where the summer sites are. If we do any analysis, so thinking about how close, if you do any in-house analysis, are we doing any analysis on our end, making sure that we know where the sites are relative to other things. So for example, how many sites were located in this county, or how many sites were located in an eligible block group. Those can all be questions that can be answered, but only if we have the right information. And then also the future planning. So thinking about all of these data will go onto the capacity builder. And so if the data aren't correct, the data are spread kind of through the partners, through the summer site vendor, and then through the capacity builder. So because the data are so distributed to so many different parts, having the right data is essential, so that way everyone has the right information. So also I want to talk about why dates are important. I mentioned some dates being in 2015, 2014. So dates are really important for us because it lets children and families know when the sites are open. We don't want them to show up to a site and think that it's not open. And so that's great. And we want them to be there and know, hey, it's open July 14th, and not to show up. It might be the right location, but it might be the wrong date. We also use the dates for the Summer Site Finder. So we don't display sites when they're not open, and that's just to make it really easy for the families and children. They don't have to, make that question in their head, oh, is this open or is this not open? And then also the Capacity Builder now has a filter, and that's for planning. And so if people want to look at, well, what sites were open last June versus what sites were open in last August, having the right dates there can really be helpful because we know that in June there tends to be a lot more summer sites for summer school. And then if you look at the picture in August, it can actually be quite a different picture where there's not as many summer sites open. So, I see one more question. Our system already has latitude and longitude, and that's basically the X, Y's on the map. And for each site, which is great, and says, would it be helpful to have it or just submit the requested data? At this point, thank you for that question. At this point, we're not doing having the lat longs included, but it's something that we're considering going forward just for this very reason. So many people already have the XYs in their data, but also for things that don't geocode well, they don't go on the map well. It might be an answer to that. So for this year, it'd be great if you could just submit the data and we could correct it on the back end if you're not seeing the sites in the right place. But for what we're requesting from you all is just to get the data that are in the template. Thank you for that question. That was a good question. So another thing that comes up a lot is site type. So we only put open sites on the Site Finder because we don't want kids going to sites that are closed. We don't want them to say, oh, well, you're not enrolled, so you can't get a meal here. That would be an awful thing for a kid to experience, especially a hungry child. And so we want them to go to sites where they know that they can get a meal and really build that trust. So having the right sites and knowing that they're open sites is important for the site finder. So for our template, it has 4 types, which is open, closed, camps, or migrant. And so those are the 4 site types. And I know that for your systems, you might have a lot of other site types. So it could be, I gave you some examples that have errored out on our system, which is restricted, site status, which is just simply somebody's copied that down instead of it actually being one of the 4, which is open, closed, camp, or migrant. It could be continuous calendar, homeless site, children or shelter, non-educational. So all of those are maybe really important for your systems, but for our systems, we need to know, are they open, closed, camp, or migrant, and knowing that the open ones will be the ones that make it onto the site finder. So I want to show you an example, and I'm not picking on Alabama. All of my examples today will come from Alabama, and that's simply because it's early in the alphabet. So, you know, just like people named Alex get picked first to go on in any school, you'll see we're going to do Alabama here. So this is a site. I looked up, this was a real site last year, about 1100 Mountain Gap Road, and here it is on the map. And I wanted to show you, I experimented with that data. So what I did was I took the full address. The address was perfect when it was submitted, so that was great. And then what I did was just going through all the issues we just talked about, essentially made those issues here. So under site name, I've listed full address, so this one is the correct one. The next one is P.O. Box, so this would be as if they had put the P.O. Box. The next one is no street, and this happens too, where the street will just be empty and we just have the city. One issue that I'm going to talk a little bit more about later is no leading zero. So this would be, you see this 4-digit zip code. And this can happen for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's just a typing error, but sometimes, especially for the northeast part of the United States, zip codes start with zeros. And what Excel does, and I will show you an example of this, but what Excel does is it thinks it's a number. So it automatically gets rid of your leading zero. And so your zip codes go from 5 numbers to 4. And that's when you have huge issues with zip codes and getting the correct zip codes. So zip codes should always be 5 numbers, which sounds obvious, I know. But in Excel, it thinks it's a number. It thinks it's like money or account or the number of something. It doesn't know it's a zip code, and you have to tell it. And I'm going to show you how to do that later. And then I also showed this intersection. So let me go to the next. So I geocoded these data, and this is what it looks like when you get the geocoded results, and as promised, there will be a demonstration later. So this is the geocoding results, and here you can see the same data, and all it is was appended with some new information. So location name, or LOC underscore name, it shows you how it's actually matched. So here's street name, so it means I matched this to a street. And this confidence on the right, the score, it shows you how confident it is about that match. And the status means is an M for matched. And there's 2 other ones. One is tied, and one is for U for unmatched. But so all of these matched, and so visually it looks like, this makes sense. U.S. Postal, admin places, and street address. So now I'm going to show you what this actually looks like on the map. So again, here I just did this in Google. Here's where the site is, and then this is a wide shot so you can see how disparate the results are. And here's what they look like when I geocoded them. And the labels on here are what they actually look like. I'm sorry, what the site name was. So no leading zero, you can see it's way up there in the city center. And that's what it's going to do. It's going to be like, this isn't even a zip code. I don't know what to do with this. The full address is here. This is where the intersection went. This is both the no street and the P.O. box, because having a P.O. box is just the same as having no street. P.O. boxes don't mean anything to the geocoder. So you can see that both of them are in the same spot. But you can see that if you don't have the correct address, it can really have widely different spaces on the map And especially if kids are on foot or their parents are driving them, this can be a huge issue. Gas is expensive, transportation is expensive, and so having the right address is really important. First, before we go on, I just wanted to see if there's any, feel free to type questions as we go, or if you have any comments or feedback, feel free to type it in the chat box. So I talked to our folks in OIT about some of the issues that they've seen. That's our technology folks. They're the back end of the summer tech support. And so these are some of the things that they've seen over the years as we've been doing this. So one is, this is to teach how to fix those common errors. So one is the columns are in the wrong order. And so that could be, I did an example here where you have site name, site address 2. And if you look on the top is site name, site status, site address 1, and site address 2. So the way, when I've ever manipulated data, the way that I fix this is to take the data that I have and I insert a blank row above the column header row. So that would be, essentially row 2 would, or row 1 would go to row 2, which is, this is already done in this example. And then I would copy the first row of the template, the one that you're supposed to be using, so that is, and then paste it in there, which is in row 1 at this point. And so what's great about this is you can line them up visually and see, oh, site status is missing from here. And then you can see it actually, when that's off, it messes all of them up. Now they're all off. And it makes it really difficult to put them back in. And this can also happen with extra columns that can help you check for any missing columns. This is just a really useful check to do, especially in the early parts of summer when you're getting your templates together. And I think as we've gone forward, this has probably been fixed quite a lot. So but this is one way to fix that issue if you're continuing to have that issue. Another one that I use a lot is filtering, and that can help to solve all sorts of issues. So here's a snapshot of what Excel looks like, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Under the Home tab, there's a sort and filter, and you can see here there's a filter right here. And what's nice about filter, and I'm going to show you the next thing, is it pops up these little arrows for each column that you have. And so in this example, this is the one that I've filtered based on site status. And you can see here all of the different types of sites that are in here. But really, there should only be 4. And this is a great way to check, are all of these correct? Are all of these just one of these 4 types? And so what you can do then is just select the ones that you have, and then and just make sure that they're uniform across. And this can help you check for uniformity across all of your data. You can also help it to find missing data, because the last one will say blanks. So for example, if you go in the site name, you do the filter and you look and it goes down and you see that there's any blanks, you can say, oh, I need to fill in that site name. And the same with street address. There's a lot of different ones that you can use to make sure that you don't have any blank data, especially on the data that are essential to the Summer Site Finder. It can also help you find zip codes without 5 numbers. You can see the sort A to Z and Z to A. So if you sort it and you see, oh, I have some that are only 4 numbers long, or I see some that are 6 numbers long, it'll help you realize where those errors are. And it can also help you sort to find zip codes that are not in your state. So if you sort it out and then you start to see, maybe you're in Minnesota, I'm using that example because that's the zip codes that I know, and it's from, most of them start with 5, and you see, oh, there's some 8s in here, or there's some 2s in here, like the numbers start with 8 or 2, you can see, oh, these zip codes are just not right. And that can happen really easily, because as people type stuff in, the numbers just get switched around, especially if a sponsor has a ton of sites. Just anybody who's typed in data knows that can happen super easily. You just mix up 2 numbers, especially if you have a lot of numbers. So another issue that we've seen is formatting as text. And this is where that leading 0 comes in. And so for the East Coast, especially the Northeast Coast, to make sure to think about this, this is when, if you're pulling in your data, and let's say you're exporting from your system to Excel, most often it will come in as a CSV, and a CSV is just a comma separated values. It just means all of the data are just have commas between them. But the key is here, when you're in that import wizard, to change all of the data to text, and that way it'll keep your leading zero, because especially for zip codes, if you don't change it to text, like I mentioned, the leading zero will fall off because it's going to change it automatically to a number. And I'm going to talk a little about, when we go over the template, I'll talk about more about all fields should be text except for the date. So anything you're pulling in, you should always be making sure that all the fields are text, except for obviously the date field, because that one we're actually using as dates, and we're going to use that to make sure we're putting up the right data at the right time. So here's another way, once you have the data in Excel, to check to make sure your data are in text. So I checked here, you can see I checked the phone number, and you can look at the column here, and same in Excel, it's in that same home tab. You can see at the bottom where it says text. And so just making sure again that all of those, everything that's not a date is formatted as text. So now I'm going to show you the template. So a lot of folks are familiar with the template and have used it before. So let me just go over to the beginning of it. So this is the 2017 template. We're going to send this out to everyone who's participated. You're going to get this in your email. This will also be available on our site where you've gotten it before. We haven't changed the columns here, so everything will look very similar, making sure everything is text. And here's Excel, so you can see, here's the text. You can see that, oh, yep, that is text. And you can see here's the contact names. And then let me just zoom over. Here's the date, and you're going to see, okay, this is now formatted as a date, and that's what we're looking for. And you can see here the end date is right here. And what's good about this example is it's showing that you can enter the year both either in 2 digits, like 17, or you can enter it as 2017. And there's actually an instruction sheet that I'm going to show you that can help you kind of with the formatting. Here's the days of operation. And this is a good one to do on the sort as well, because you want to make sure you don't have, full days spelled out. Your choices here are the ones that are listed. There's not additional choices. So it has to, if it's Monday, it's an M. It's not anything else. Okay, and then we have the times, and then you might have a state reference, and I think that was a request of a lot of states, so that's there now. So this might be your ID number for that site, and so that's where that goes. That can especially help with data duplicates later, any communication if you're communicating with our summer tech support. If you're curious about a specific site, that might be a great way to communicate other than site name, because I know that there's like a lot of YMCAs. When you see the template, you're going to see all these blue sections. This is for our data, so don't fill out things in the blue shaded area. All of the data that you should be filling out are in the white area over to the left. So feel free to type any questions about that. And I'm going to show you the instructions. They'll also go out. So here's the instructions that will go out with this once the webinar is completed. And here you can see the field order, so what column it should be in, what name it already has, whether it's required or not. So the site phone number, for example, is strongly suggested. And that's because we want parents to be able to call, especially if the site is far away, or they want to make sure that the site is going to be open. Maybe it's raining. So having the site phone number is really helpful. There might be an extension, for example, to that phone number, so that's going to be dependent on site. And I'm actually going to use the filter field here so we can look at, I'm going to manipulate this a little bit. We can look at the data. It might not be. So to do the filter, I'm going to show you. So this is an example of filter. I selected the table, I went to filter, it made the little boxes at the end of each column, and now I can see, okay, here are the different choices. So Some are required, some are strongly suggested, some are optional, some are dependent on site, and some are administrative, and some are blank. So let's look at the administrative ones. And this is what's nice too, is if, let's say, you have a bunch of, different types of camps or something, and you want to just look at, why do they have all these different names? In the admin here, you can see, okay, these are the ones that are meant for FNS only. So these were those blued out, grayed out sections, so those you don't need to complete. And then you can just go back to select all, and they'll all just be right back where they were. Field type can tell you what's in there. So bar chart just means that it can be either alphabetical or it can be character. But for all geocoding, it has a limit of 255 characters, which is it's usually about 3 to 4 sentences. So for site name, there's no chance that you're going to have that long of a name. But for example here, for site state, we don't want you to write out the whole state. We just want you to put in the 2-character abbreviation for your state. And that's helpful for a wide variety of reasons. You can also see, here's the date field. You can see the hours open. This is limited. So that is, sometimes the hours open might go a little long, but just be aware that sometimes they need to be abbreviated to the 255. And then here is business rules. So this will help you with more additional information as you go forward when you're trying to think about, should this go in this data field or should this go in this data field? Why did we ask it this way? And then there's some examples here on the right. And again, I just wanted to show you, like, here's, for example, the different formats of phone numbers. Here's the, this is the zip code. And so you might have the last 4. So here's an example of that, or you might just have the 5 there. And, it's, for the most part, when I've geocoded, you just need the 5. But if you have the extension of 4, you don't have to take it out. The other one I wanted to point out is the dates, and this is what I was saying, that you can have, there's the month, the day, and there's the year, but you can also use the 4-digit year. And yeah, so use this as much as you can to kind of help with your data and how you're using it. So now I'm going to go back to the webinar. And so what's next? So in early May, states can begin to submit data to Summer Tech Support. That's at our FNS-USDA.gov. For those who are have done this for a few years, this is probably old hat to you, but just to know that it's there. And then the state agencies can also request feedback. So these are reports that we're doing every week. So how many sites were duplicates from the previous run? This is done, and we call them cycles. So there's about a little under 20 every summer. So each cycle is 1 week. So we get the data in. They then go through the process that we discussed in the beginning, that kind of cleanup process, and then get sent on to our contractor. And then they shoot it back and tell us how many made it onto the map. And throughout that cycle process, every week, we get a report, and it will tell us how many were duplicates, how many sites didn't have enough information. So this would be the required information. So if we don't have the site name, for example, it's not even going to get to the contractor. We're going to just not push that through, because every one that we push through costs, it doesn't cost a lot, but it costs a little bit. And so we want to make sure that the data that we're sending through, it has a chance to get on the map. You can also see how many sites actually made it to the map, so the Summer Site Finder. And then any other questions that you have as the summer progresses, you can write to Summer Tech Support about these tech issues and getting your sites on the map. So I also wanted to point out our open data page. So this is when I was talking about our summer partners and the people that are using the data behind it. Here's the Summer Site Finder, and down at the bottom is developer tools. So this is something that you can use if you wanted to put the data, put this map, embed it on your own website, for example, or you can use it to pull out your own data and just, you can use it for analysis features or for whatever you want. And we also have an open data page, and that link is here. And that is nice because you can always download the data at any time. You don't have to request it. It's just sitting out there waiting for you. And you can also filter on the fly, and you can download it or put it into your own API if you have built your own mobile apps, for example. And I'm actually going to show you the live version as well, just so you can see what that looks like. So here's our open data page. This is a lot of different data. The eligibility data is also out there if you need to use that. I'm going to click on the 2016 sites because that's what we're talking about today. And here you can see the download data set on the right. You can download it as a spreadsheet. And if you're doing GIS, the Google platforms use KML, and we use ArcGIS at FNS, and that is the shapefile. So you can download it in really any format that you want. And then the APIs are here. I haven't worked with a lot of APIs, so but for you folks that do, this is what you need to do that. You can also share this data. You can look at it in the table. You can see that there's quite a lot of data, so give it some time. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to pop up. And then there's also some charts, and you can actually go through and do some little analysis on the fly if you want to do that. So just to know that these data are out there at any time for you to use. And every week, whenever we go through one cycle, it'll be updated. So it's just updated automatically on the back end. And you can actually see that if I go back, oh, 1 second. You'll see the date that they were last updated. So this is eligibility data. And you can see that I updated that 4 months ago. So here in the About section, you can see when it was last updated, and you can get more information. But you can see, okay, this was updated. It'll show you an actual date when it's closer to the time. And so you can see, was this new data or is this old data? Okay. I'm not seeing a lot of questions coming in, but feel free to write questions, as many as you have. Okay. So now just to review, so this is just a checklist for you to think about, making sure the columns are in the right order, making sure the restricted fields have the acceptable data. We talked about site type. We also talked about the days of the week, making sure that like the dates are correct, making sure that they're in the right format, that the dates are within the range of summer 2017. So I've seen that kind of throughout from the beginning of this project to as we've gone forward. Some of the dates just kind of linger on from previous years, but we need them to be within kind of the range of summer 2017. So no 2016 or 2018 dates in there, just 2017. Zip codes should all be 5 numbers long, which seems so obvious, I know, but for Excel it just isn't. Everything should be formatted as text except for the dates. And all required fields are completed, so no blanks. And again, you can use that template to look at which ones are required. And so making sure that they all have data that we need to put it on the Summer Site Finder. And you can ask your questions to Summer Tech Support at fns.usda.gov. So now I'm going to demonstrate for you all some of the, how the geocoding actually looks, so you can see what it looks like on our end. This is the contractors do it. We don't do it in-house, but I'm going to show you just kind of what it looks like when we do it. I got a question. Do state agencies have to request feedback, or is there a report on the site that can be accessed? I'm going to save that for the folks from OIT who are listening in. My understanding is that it needs to be requested, but when we get to the questions part, I'll flag that for them. So this is ArcGIS Online. You do not have to learn what this looks like. The idea here is for you just to see that there's a map here that is the United States. The table over here is essentially the data that you've seen before. So here I'm going to zoom over to, I'm sorry. Let me show you. Okay. So this is the result of geocoding that we've done before. So you can see these are in Alabama, and again, I'm not picking on you, Alabama. It's just you were first on my list of data that I had. So here's all the data that you're used to entering. Here's site type, here's site address, there's site address 2, here's the site city, site state, site zip, etc. And you can see on the left, I'm going to zoom over. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make anyone sick here. you can see here's the location names that we talked about. The street name, point address is what we're like, that's the gold standard, is to be, this is this house here. And even any of us who kind of put things in Google and you drive there and it says it's on one side of the street or the other, that means it's not going to a point. That means it's going to the street. And so that's where, you know, sometimes you're like looking on the wrong side of the street and it's really on the other side of the street. That means that it's not at the point, it's looking at the street address. And then the score is actually showing you how confident it is that this is the actual match. So, and we actually do not, for anything that's actually this location name goes to zip code, we don't put that on the map, and we do that because we don't want kids to go to the zip code. And I showed you in the beginning how detrimental that is, because the site is nowhere usually, I mean, it would be by very slim chance that the site would be anywhere near where the center of the zip code would be. And so we definitely don't want those kids kind of going through anywhere looking for a site that's just nowhere near where they're looking. And that's another reason that the phone number can be so helpful. So I'm going to look at the sheet 1. So this is the one that I showed you before, the one that I had made. So here's just what you're looking at, full address, P.O. Box. It was the same one that we looked at before, where I had kind of manipulated the data of the full address that was in there. That was perfect. That was exactly what we wanted. It has all of the information that we want. And then I went in and I changed these so that they could be these weird other ones. So this is the P.O. Box, the no street, no lead, 0. And so it's very easy. So all you do is you go here to geocode addresses, which just means put it on a map. And it's going to make me sign in. Bear with me for a second. You can think of your questions or any comments that you have while this is taking a second. Okay. And so it just is asking what addresses do you want me to link up, and then you just very easily just say, okay, it's asking address, it's asking your city, and we have them all labeled that way. So that's another reason that it's really useful to keep all of the sites or all of the headers the same. So we know that this is a city. So don't call it a town, don't call it a village. We need it to just say city. That way across we have all of the states and territories to deal with. So that's why it's really good to have everything be uniform for us, just because we're doing this every week. So this is happening every week as we go forward. So now I'm going to say okay, and you're going to see it takes very little time. It goes through. It says how many matched, how many were unmatched, and I'm going to close this. So you just, it's pretty simple. And then I'm actually going to take away these. And so this is the example that I showed you before. It's just going to look exactly the same, just with fewer information. So like the streets and stuff won't be on there. It won't look like the Google map that I showed you before. Sorry, it does take a while to load. So this one that we're seeing up here, the one that's way up there, this is the one that we saw was really far up there, and this is the full address. We can also go here. Let's see. Oh, that does not like my data source. One second. Okay. Okay. It's for some reason not showing that right now. I think it's just taking a while to load them. Bizarre. Okay. Yep. The table is kind of crapping out on me, so I'm sorry about that. But what I did want to show you is I took the whole data set. I just didn't want to do it kind of live and for you guys to wait. And I took everything that was in one of the files, and I wanted to show you what it looked like. And let me zoom out. And so let me zoom in a little bit back to the United States. And so these data, you can see some of them, I know that that's kind of hard to look at. So some of the data are way out there. They're not anywhere near Alabama. And so this means that these data, we know that those aren't correct, but we won't actually know that when we geocode them. So sometimes they're just wrong, and it's hard for us to know that. But what's even harder for us to know is that if they're within the state and they're wrong, it's very hard for us to see, okay, we know that this is wrong and why. And that's why it's so useful for you all to see when you see stuff on the map, or maybe you hear from families or children, the site is not where we think it is. It can be helpful for us if you give that information back, because the ones that are actually within the state, it's really hard for us to know, oh, this isn't in the right spot. Because if it matched and it looks right, and all of the kind of computer stuff went through, we're going to just say, okay, well, that's what happened. Okay, so let's look. It's matched to Massachusetts. Let's go explore why that might be. I'm just kind of zooming through. These are all the things that come out of geocoding. So I'm going to move to the part that you see. So this is Douglas Middle School, and it's a migrant site. And then here's the street address, and it does say Douglas, Alabama, 35964. Now, what I did was I went in and I put this into Google, and it actually didn't come out because it's not Eagle Drive. It's like Eagle Point Drive, and so making sure that the site address actually is the right one is very helpful. So making sure that you're actually looking at your site address is correct. So drive versus street versus southwest versus northwest. DC gets that a lot of times, I know. So making sure that you have all of the correct site address can really be helpful for getting the dots on the map. So it's kind of the end of the demonstration that I have now. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and say thank you for joining the webinar. Is it possible to open up the phone lines?
I'm sorry, it's not.
Okay.
It all has to be done on the chat box below on the left-hand side of the screen.
Joe, do you mind answering the question if state agencies have to request site feedback, or is there a report on our site that they can be accessed?
And that's an excellent question. And yes, we do provide information. So as we complete each cycle, that weekly cycle, we post back to the partner website the results of that cycle. So we give you a total number across that entire cycle, how many were processed, how many were published, as well as we provide an attached file that gives you some of that output that Tracy was showing earlier. So it shows the data along with some of the error codes that our mapping tool identified. We can go further and do more detailed analysis for any state that is particularly interested in that. They can always request that through the email address. We can also, if they wish, go through last year's results across all of the cycles for their particular state. We can kind of talk them through what were some of the common things that we found that may have prevented something from mapping. And typically it's something like that Tracy mentioned. It's a zip code, or it was missing some key piece of information like the end date or the beginning date, or the dates were kind of the wrong year or for something like that. So we're more than happy to work with you guys in any way that we can. We understand that this is a lot of work on your behalf, and we do appreciate what you're doing and allowing us to compile all this information together to give those people that are looking for these meals a one-stop shop place so they can find those meals.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Mm-hmm. And thank you again for mentioning how grateful we are that you guys do send in the data. We couldn't do this without you, so we appreciate it. I'm looking for more questions. We have another 40 minutes for time. We obviously don't have to use it if there's no other questions, but while people are thinking of their questions, Joe, is there anything else you wanted to add? Any thoughts?
The first couple cycles, reinforced, kind of monitor those closely so that you can kind of see how your state is doing. And, if you make course corrections early in the season, you're probably not going to have any challenges for the rest of the year. We do a lot of back-end processing to make sure we're not republishing information that's already out there, which is why sometimes the total number that gets published isn't always, lining up maybe with what you've given us. You can always just give us the new information by each week. If you don't have new information for that week, which is fine and that happens, then there's no need to resubmit what you've already given us, unless you find that you're making some corrections to some of that information and want to resubmit it. We do, from a scheduling perspective, we do accept new sites for that cycle up until Wednesday, close of business, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We take the Wednesday evening and Thursday to shape the information. We publish it by Friday, close of business, and then we go to the next cycle. We do put all that information out on the partner website. We'll have a schedule out there. We're updating that now. If you don't have access to that, we will be reaching out through the regions to identify the program and the technical points of contact that need access to that. And we'll be more than happy to add you to that if you don't have access to it now. And we also will be posting on the partner website any instructions on how to get bad sites off the map. So if there's things that are in there that are mapped that are incorrect, we'll provide instructions there on what's the process to get those taken out or fixed.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially about if you go out to monitor and, for, let's say there was a health and safety issue, if there's something that's immediate that we need to get off the map, let us know, and, we'll have those instructions out there. So, yeah, that's a great point. And if people change their dates or they change any of that, those are the types of corrections that Joe was mentioning. So sometimes sites will stay open longer, or maybe they'll start serving a different meal or serve more meals, which is great. So thinking about those kinds of, it can also be just kind of updates to the data. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions come in. You can always feel free to talk to your regional office as well. If there's any other questions that you have about the data specifically, Summer Tech Support has been great at getting the data, working with all of you and then getting the data on the map. But I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we'll call that the end of the webinar. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for all you do to feed kids in the summer. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.